Hello all, and welcome back to a new episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And we are joined by Dillon.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Dillon. All right. So this season, or each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. This season, we are reviewing The Last of Us Season 2, and y'all, we've made it to the season finale. Are you guys breathing sighs of relief? We made it to the end of this journey? Sarah, I know, is jumping for joy.
I sure am. I am jumping for joy. I am so pleased that we have made it. We have made it through, guys, which is quite an accomplishment. Mm-hmm. Go team.
We did it. We did it. Today we're going to be talking about the Season 2 finale. This is Episode 7, titled Convergence. So Sarah, do you want to kick us off with a summary for this season finale episode?
Sure. Amid the battle between Seattle's warring factions, Ellie's search draws her toward a devastating confrontation.
Drama, stakes.
Ooh,
See if they deliver on it. Okay, let's round table our episode titles for this finale. Dillon, what is yours?
A Haunted Petco hosts Jerry Springer.
Wow. Oh my gosh, my brain is just absorbing all of that, every morsel. That was so good.
I also feel as though you may have unlocked, like, the next level of reality television. Like, that's a great premise that we could sell to Netflix. I'm just saying.
I'd watch that over The Last of Us. Sorry, too soon? Too soon?
Oh, it's so good.
So good. So good. Okay, Sarah, what is your episode title for The Last of Us? Are we birthing new Netflix concepts?
I am not. I don't know that any of us will ever be able to top Dillon's that he just did. Yeah, my title is much less creative, which is The Storm.
Oh, nice. Very good. Very good. There is a lot of that. My episode title is Your Community, My Community.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we get a lot of that in there too.
We do. We do. Okay, so in this first section, let's temp check, share all of our high-level thoughts and feelings about the season finale, and we won't spoil this finale episode quite yet, and then we'll give a spoiler and dive fully in. So this is our time to figure out how to talk very high-level about this episode. Dillon, curious to hear thoughts or reactions to this finale.
I always
so good.
Have these big sighs.
They're really satisfying to me.
There were two good episodes this season, and I do think this was one of them. I mostly enjoyed it. I have many complaints, but the broad strokes are there and told in a way that I think pulls the narrative along in the direction that I was wanting it to go. So I'm overall happy. How did you receive it?
Very good. Okay, that's very good. Yes, I'm intrigued to dive into more, both what worked well for you and then what some of those complaints might be. Sarah, thoughts about this finale?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. You know, there's some really, really good moments. So if you go back and listen to our watch along episode that we posted a couple days ago, you'll be able to hear me and Jen's reaction in real time. And there were a number of moments where we're watching a scene and we're like, okay, this is good. This is good. Where has this been for the entire season? So I think for me, because the season on the whole has been pretty weak, some of those moments, which were good, didn't quite land the way that I think that they were meant to. And I still think that a lot of the emotional beats are still off for me. You know, there's just things that the show is interested in doing that I'm not interested in, and the pieces that I am interested in, the show is not interested in exploring. So I think, I don't know, it might be a me problem, but yeah, there are things that I wanted to explore that this episode hints at and then just doesn't do anything with. And I was like, well, why can't we be over there doing that instead of what we're doing? But I do think this is one of the better episodes of the season. which isn't a high bar to clear, but I do agree that this is one of the better ones, and there are some really good scenes in this. But yeah, the emotional weight just wasn't there for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so you're kind of seeing everything that's happening in this episode in context of how we even got to some of those moments and those big emotional beats that happen in this episode. I would say this episode gives me a little bit of more hope, I think, than I thought that I would have for the next season, because I can see how a lot of the ingredients are there. Like, I actually was thinking a lot about your puzzle pieces metaphor, Dillon, from our previous episode, because now that we've arrived at the end of this season, a lot of the thread lines are like now very clear, and where they all fall at the end of this season's journey end up in clear places. But it's almost like the order, the structure, and the pacing is the problem. But a lot of the thread lines I think are really interesting. There's this really amazing scene between Jesse and Ellie that I think should have come earlier to frame the rest of this whole season and really the show in general. That would have been really interesting. There's some thematic bits with Ellie and some of the people that she comes across and some of the things that happen there that have, I think, really great emotional stakes and would have been an incredibly emotional moment, but they almost like over index on that theme too much leading up until this point, that by the time we get to that point, we're like, okay, I get what you're doing here. And yes, it's kind of pulling on my heartstrings, but also I see what you're doing. And that kind of breaks the emotional magic of what makes movies and TV so great. So I really, now that we've arrived at the end of the season, see the vision. I think the execution did not work and the pacing and structure did not work, but the thread lines are right and they could have been better and they could have been really impactful. And I imagine for you, Dillon, like you have experienced so many of those thread lines in the game. And so you've really seen and lived out how they could come together in a really great way. So yeah, it's really like puzzle that we've put together in a funky way, but the pieces are good. The pieces are quite good. All right. Well, let's give a spoiler alert. So if you haven't seen the season finale of The Last of Us Season 2, we're about to spoil it completely. So we have full free reign to dive in now. All right. Where do we want to dive in first? Actually, I'm curious to hear, Dillon, for you, what were some of the moments that really did work in this episode for you? Let's maybe start there.
Oh, we're going... For me, I mean, I kind of want to start at the end.
Okay, yeah. Let's do it.
So the theater scene, that last 1 to 2 minutes, I just love. I think that is... Now, sorry, too many thoughts. So rushing down the hallway, Tommy's going out, taking care of things. You hear a scuffle, burst through the door. We've had all of this hype about Jesse foreshadowing. You would do anything for me to come after me. I don't want to die out here. Let's get back home. Right? You have all this, like, something is coming for Jesse. Yeah. But I don't know, in my mind, at least the way I've been conditioned from other media, I expected that to play out in some type of ongoing threat, right? Jesse gets kidnapped. Jesse gets pinned somewhere, right? And now the gang has to go rush to get him. And so this finality, this instantaneous burst through the door, bullet to the face and death. Yep. It short circuits my normal thought process and approach to how I thought that was going to go, and it just hits so hard. But you don't have any time to process it. You go instantly from that to, well, what's happening to Tommy, and now what's happening to Ellie? Where's Dina? Right? What's Abby telling me and shouting through? So it raises everything. It makes you focus in so much more. You also already have that threat of death right there in your face, so it makes what's happening to Tommy, Ellie, Abby so much more meaningful. And as short as the dialogue is, I really love the ending of Abby going, I don't remember exactly what she says, but basically I let you live and you wasted it, and then gunshot, fade to black. It's so good. I feel like that's actually the way something like that might go, right? And for me, I just think it sets up season 3 for a very good place. If they wanted to try and pull this back from the depths, I thought that last 1 to 2 minutes was really well done.
Yes, I absolutely loved that sequence as well. I think when in our watch along, Sarah and I were like, "Wow, wait, that was really good. That was really good," because it subverts so much of the expectations that I think we have as TV watchers, film goers, where we expect like a big climactic fight sequence. And in the midst of that big fight sequence, we know that he's going to die, but we have to see it like lead up to that point, and then it's going to be big and it's going to be dramatic. And the surprise of that fast gunshot that happens before he like barely makes it out the door is so genius and so shocking and absolutely thrilling. I think that is a great example of the show really using those ingredients and execution and understanding of maybe our audience expectations and being able to subvert them. I thought that was so fabulous. And I think also that the savagery of it being a shot to the head too, and you just see blood splatter across his face, was just like it's a quick shot of him, but it feels so brutal after he's had, right seconds before it, a beautiful moment of reconciliation and connection with Ellie, and then seconds later he meets his end. There's something, I think, really tragic, but also really poetic about that as well. Like, he died with his character, his values. He died good and didn't let the world of the apocalypse change him and turn him into this, like, draw out all those evil, difficult, ugly sides of him. The way that we see that so many characters in this world are being affected by that. He died truly good. And that's something like really beautiful too, as well, that I thought was really neat. So I love that character so much that I was like, I just want more of his character. But he needed to die, and it was a. I think I yelled at the TV. That was such a great way for him to die, not for the character, but for the show. That was a great way for that character to die.
And like you said, it's just so jarring too, because he's, barreling through the door and then bam, he's out, he's done. And that is pretty unexpected, just and shocking the way that happens. So I thought that change of tempo and change of pace was really, really effective. And, it's jarring for us as the viewers, and obviously it's jarring for Ellie, who has just barreled into this moment, and now her friend, for lack of a better word, is dead, and Tommy is potentially about to die too. Like, we are jarred and are feeling like a slight little bit of what Ellie is feeling in that moment.
Okay, while we're on the topic of this ending sequence, let's walk ourselves forward the next couple of beats that happen, where we get the confrontation between Abby and Ellie. Thoughts about how that went?
I like it mostly, although I'm being real nitpicky here, but there's so much weight in this confrontation, right? As Ellie has been chasing Abby, trying to get to her, but for her love of Tommy, throws her gun to the side, doesn't act on vengeance.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
But my nitpickiness is she was a little too pleading. I don't know. It was a little too just like, I've lost all hope. I've completely given up. Please. Like, and I'm in, it's only because I'm comparing it to the acting in the game. And I know that's the case, but there's more edge. There's more depth. There's more, I don't want Tommy to die, but also like kind of screw you too, Abby. Like there's a deepness there. And I felt like Bella Ramsey was just a little too much on the soft side in that dialogue for me. But generally, liked it. I think for all of its quickness, there's lots of little tiny details that help tell a bigger story about what's happening relationship-wise.
Sarah and I were cracking up at the moment where Ellie says to her in that scene about Mel and Owen, she says, I didn't mean to hurt them. Okay. Like, you just, tortured Nora, her other friend, and I guess you murdered the other two and threatened their lives for information. Like, it's no big deal, It was just kind of a funny moment, but the choice that Ellie makes to throw the gun away, I think, is so notable, because the whole show up at this point, she's been pledging vengeance. And we, as the viewers, I think, really conclude that everything that she just saw and witnessed with Owen and specifically Mel and those deaths, I think, like, really, really sunk in with her and perhaps shaped her instincts in that moment, because for so much of this show, she's been out for blood, out for vengeance. And having seen like human suffering in that way, I think it really does change maybe how you would react in that moment. Had she not gone through those few scenes beforehand and just met Abby, I think her reactions might be different. And also, I think having not even had time to process seeing Jesse dead and blood sleeping through him, and then seeing Tommy in a state that's really high, I think that just like totally rewires and changes how you as a human being would react when you see your loved ones hurt, you know? So I think those choices were really neat because we have been building up to it, and it happened so differently than I think Ellie expected it would, where she's going in there, she's doing her mission, she's going to get out of there. And it's all kind of turned on its head for her.
Yeah, everything has changed. And I think it's also so interesting that, you know, Ellie, especially in this episode, is on this quest for revenge finally, and we're like moving toward that. And okay, I'm gonna find Abby and I'm gonna take her out. And she's trying to infiltrate Abby's turf and taking the fight to Abby, and then she returns defeated, has this really emotional moment with Jesse, and then Abby has had the exact same thought process and shows up where Ellie is. And so I think that also kind of brings full circle what we had talked about in a previous episode of these two characters are so similar to each other and they think through things similarly. And so I thought a lot of their dialogue was interesting too, because you can tell that these two obviously are on different sides of this, but they have some real similarities that are coming through kind of throughout the show. So I thought that was also an interesting conversation and just an interesting way for us to finally see Abby after so many episodes of not seeing her at all.
If I may, I'd like to switch over to I'd like to jump to the whole Owen Mel situation. So I agree with the comment about Ellie saying she didn't mean to hurt them. But I think so here was one of my issues with the show is we went from the death of Nora, and then we have this scene in this episode where Ellie seems genuinely like remorseful about all of that. And so now when we make it just 30 minutes later to Mel and Owen, it actually seems like she genuinely does not want to hurt them. And then is just forced to because Owen tries to kill her, and that's evidenced by the show killing them in a single bullet, right? It was instantaneous. So Ellie was almost the victim, right? She was just responding to that trigger. And so now she's talking to Abby, and I do think in the show, she is legitimately saying, I didn't mean to hurt them. And that, I don't know. I don't even fully know what to make of it, but let me juxtapose that with slight alterations that the game makes that I think makes this much different in meaning. In the game, Ellie has talked about throughout how she's going to kill everybody, the whole crew. In the show, all we ever really hear about is Abby, 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 where is Abby? Even when Ellie goes after Nora, that's like her main line of questioning. And we kind of have the show correcting some of the, maybe I shouldn't have killed Nora. Maybe I went a bit too far, right? First kill Ellie makes, we already have this like walking back and remorsefulness. Game doesn't do that. Game stays a lot more committed. And you also have more gap. You have more spacing between Nora and Mel and Owen's death in the game. So through other cues, by the time you get to Mel and Owen, Ellie says the same thing, that she doesn't want to kill anybody, but you don't believe her. You think that she's lying and is still acting on her vengeance, trying to just get information out of them before offing them. Then the way they both die is Owen does try to make a move, but Ellie kills Owen and then goes through a whole struggle with Mel and has a chance to not kill Mel and does it anyway. Only after killing Mel does she then find out Mel's pregnant, right? And so now fast forward, we have the exact same Abby scene, and in the game, she says, I didn't mean to kill them. But you know she's lying. right? And it tells such a different story about the character of Ellie and what she's going through. And the show, I think, for me, just seems to be pulling back on this story of revenge as much as possible, and is trying to spin it into this bigger tale about maybe rebirth and life. Like there's something here with the pregnancy and her leaning more into that with Dina. But I think the narrative is so much better when I don't fully like Ellie. When I know that Ellie is taking some bad actions and is intentionally lying, is intentionally killing and hurting people, and then is lying to those around her, right? That just, it builds more of the character for me. And it's those little subtle changes that the show is just taking me off on. So that's my soapbox around that scene. But please, I would love y'all's take on the Melanoan scene.
Wow, that's actually really fascinating that in the game, she has it sounds like a whole like kerfuffle, a struggle with Mel, and then she does choose to kill Mel in the game. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's so different. That's so different from what happens in the show, because even in the show, you could argue that her killing Owen, in some lenses, was an act of self-defense. It was an act of instinct. Yes, she's threatening to kill them to get information, but like he also, it's a Western quick draw situation, you know? And so then Mel's death is truly an accident in the show, because she gets hit by the shrapnel that blows off and it hits her neck by accident. So that is so different for even like that's a huge character delta, I would say, between video game Ellie and show Ellie, because it's a lot more sympathetic when Ellie finds out that she accidentally kills Mel, and perhaps and especially all of the feelings and emotions that she has related to that of accidentally killing someone is much different from regret, or if she doubles down on it with her choice to kill Mel. And then you're so right, it does change the scene with Abby as well. I don't know, I just feel like the show is leaning so much more into like the melodrama and the stakes with the pregnancy. I don't know. I'm curious actually if there's as much time spent in the game with all of those conversations with Dina, all of the emotions and feelings Ellie feels after discovering that Mel was pregnant. Like, I think the show clearly is painting that theme. That's, I think, one of my qualms with the Mel pregnancy death thing. I actually think that reveal in that moment could have been so impactful, especially knowing the news Ellie received about becoming a parent and having this child. But I feel like we got so many smaller moments where they already played that string multiple times. Her picking out the book, her having this whole conversation with Dina and asking about the baby. Like, we almost exhausted that like emotional beat so much that by the time we get to this point, I'm like, I see what you're doing here, you know? And it's a very dramatic, emotional scene, but I think it's almost like overdone by the time we get to it, so that it takes away from that moment. But also in the game, I guess if she actually intentionally kills Mel, that's also a very different story than is being told here. It's a huge character difference.
Yes. And to your point about some of the pregnancy things and how that plays out, in the game, Ellie is the aggressor. Ellie is the one who is hellbent on revenge and is angry about people. In this episode, Dina says, when Ellie's kind of talking about Nora, she says, yeah, well, maybe she got what she deserved. And that's not the Dina in the game. Dina is the one who it's causing a wedge in their relationship. The darker Ellie keeps getting, and Ellie's not wanting to change off of it, it drives Dina away, right? And so what kind of brings this whole Owen Mel scene home from the game's narrative is that Ellie kills both of them and is not remorseful at all. And only as she goes to loot only she goes to loot Mel and opens up her shirt does she realize she's pregnant. And then it's oh, what have I done? Right? And then we have a softening moment where you start drawing some parallels between this is my Dina. This could have been the same thing. And I haven't thought about it. I hadn't thought about the consequences of my actions. It's the first kind of remorseful moment I think you really have of Ellie in the game. And I think the reveal of Mel's pregnancy drives that so much deeper. Whereas to your point, Jen, in the show, I feel like it's just another, like, yes, it's sad and meaningful. It was a heavy scene, but I think the overall narrative and comparisons to how that death is changing Ellie's viewpoint of Dina, I think it loses a lot of that.
Yeah, I think what you described of the game doing and Ellie being so like hell-bent on revenge is a lot more interesting part of this character. You know, one of my complaints for this show and even in this episode is like, who is this Ellie? You know, which Ellie are we going to get? Because for so much of this season, her and Dina have just been palling around Seattle, you know? We're just chilling. Everything's kind of fine. We have a little loose talk of revenge, but don't actually go on this mission. And it's not until this episode, really, that she's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to revenge now. And I think had a lot of those reveals been earlier, or had Ellie been really hell-bent on this mission from the jump, then these things would be more impactful. But I don't know, man. Ellie just seems so almost like wishy-washy to me this season. So it's like, well, where did this Ellie come from that is hunting down Abby? Like, what in the world? So I think those changes with the character makes the story, I think, less interesting, because we're not following Ellie on an emotional or transformative journey. She's just kind of confusing. And I don't know, there's a lot of good emotional work that I feel like is done in this episode, but it's just not set up super well because Ellie has been so inconsistent this season.
Yeah, and kind of similar to that. And I think we talked about this in earlier episodes too, but especially now with Jesse here and some of their adventures, it still feels like Ellie is the one making poor tactical decisions, making no sense to be out and about, and it feels like she's cargo again. It feels like we're back in season 1 with like much younger Ellie that doesn't know the ropes and hasn't been extensively training and working under a bunch of people on patrols for forever, right? And I think that's one of my complaints there as well, that yes, we do have this kind of whiplashing Ellie of camping, hardcore revenge. Okay, now I'm very sad about it, but we're still going to go revenge a little bit. But also, Ellie is just not being the survivor, the soldier that she was made out to be when we were looking at her in early episodes in Jackson. It's like all of that's forgotten, and she's just kind of a secondary character as Jesse and Dina and everybody else go through these action sequences and are correcting her mistakes.
Yeah, and I also think that like the pacing and structure and maybe juxtaposition of scenes are making it more confusing for us, because before she goes on her big mission to take this tiny boat across the storming seas to go find and hunt for Abby, and there she finds Mel and Owen. She's in vengeance mode by that point, but just like 2 scenes earlier, she has a whole conversation with Dina where she reveals what happened with Joel and kind of suggesting that maybe she feels regret or she feels remorse for what she did to Nora. And it's Dina who says, well, maybe she did deserve it. And Ellie says, actually, maybe not, because of all of these reasons and these contexts that I now know about of like what they were looking forward to and why they were upset. So it almost seems like she is remorseful, maybe understanding the fuller picture and picking her head up from out of that feeling of vengeance. But then after that conversation with Jesse, she's back on the vengeance trains. And I think we've seen that happen in other episodes this season too, where Ellie will kind of express maybe hesitation about this vengeance plot, and it's Dina who keeps encouraging her to continue forward on it. And I think that makes it confusing for us to know, like, what does Ellie actually want? Because sometimes she has these moments of regret or reconsideration, and then other times she's in her like, where's Abby mode? And there's maybe a version where like that vacillation could be really interesting because it's inner turmoil and conflict, but I don't feel like it's interesting. I feel like it's actually more confusing in the way that the show's done it. Because when she's walking down that aquarium, the hallways, and she's hunting for Abby and she stumbles across Mel and Owen, I kind of was wondering, which Ellie do we get? Like, I don't know what her headspace is right now. And I think that's not great for when you're watching a story about a character and you have kind of no idea what headspace they're in. And so I'm also like finding out as she's making decisions, which I think is not the best. It's more interesting when we understand clearly what the character wants, but maybe there's things that complicate that or make that more difficult or challenging or have that character reevaluated. But every given moment, it's valuable to have an understanding of what our character's goals and where their headspace is at. And I feel like there's been a lot of vacillation for Ellie. And ironically, Dina's been the one that's been a little bit more clear and solid and maybe even unexpected, where she's like, no, we got to do this. We got to carry out this vengeance plot for the people that we love. And it almost feels like those roles should have been flipped. It sounds like they're flipped in the game too, right, Dillon?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
And I think it plays much better. But I have a rewrite. As you were talking, I went, I think I've got it. Okay. Because I hadn't even realized it, but you're right that Ellie is being an apologist. And it's like, no, wait, they have a point. And then 20 minutes later is going on a solo mission through all sorts of crazy circumstances to like get there. Anyway, I think if when Ellie gets back to the theater, Dina is like passed out from the pain or whatever, or needs to sleep. Jesse won't, let Ellie go see Dina. We skip that whole dialogue. So Jesse's like, we have to go get Tommy now. And they just leave. They go do all the same shenanigans they're going to do. And then when Ellie gets back to the theater, we go into talking with Dina, decomposing with her. We now know that Dina's out of the way up in the, room or whatever. We now have this like, crap, I've gone through 3 people, and am I doing the right thing? Maybe it is time to go home. Geez, I've really kind of screwed this up. Goes down, talks to Jesse Tommy, boom, come out, Jesse's dead. Now we have Ellie in a situation where she's thrown right back into, right as she was giving up and starting to regret her actions. She now has Jesse dead.
Ooh, yeah. So basically flip those 2 moments. Like have the Mel Owen moment. After that, she's like, oh my gosh, what have I done? But then Jesse dies, and that adds to the trauma, that adds to that redraws out all of those feelings and emotions and hurt and grief with Joel. Now you add Jesse onto that, and she's back on her vengeance plot, and Abby shows up. Oh, it's a little flip-flop, a little swap there, and that lands. That works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. That's interesting, because then those changes that she's going through, they make sense. We understand why Ellie is potentially changing course, and then why she feels like her hand is forced and is forced back into this vengeance plot. And while we're doing some rewrites here, I would also like some sort of like stakes or something with Dina being left alone in the theater. Like, she is injured and she is pregnant. Obviously, Dina is very capable and can handle herself, but like, they just go off on their adventure and we don't see Dina again. And I think that there may have been some sort of an opportunity to use that to create more tension and more stakes by really highlighting just how vulnerable Dina is. I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I wish that there was more of an acknowledgement of the really precarious place that Dina is in, and it was an opportunity for the show to really capitalize on that.
As Jesse said, we got a wounded pregnant girl. You're gonna die. I'm probably gonna die. There's a storm. We're all in trouble. Yeah, but we thought that was going to be a precarious situation, and it kind of doesn't. So I think that was an interesting, like, almost lack of payoff of a setup, like she's like, okay, I'm going to barricade here. I'm very wounded, very pregnant. And that's a great recipe for some stakes. What happens to Dina in the game, Dillon? Does she just show up again back at the theater? She's good.
So it's basically the same thing, except early on in the game, like you're actually like traveling and like fighting things together, but you already have some tension of like calling back to earlier in the season, right? Dina's getting sick a lot, and Ellie keeps like nagging at her and is getting mad. And it's like, what's wrong? Like, and she's like, oh no, it's nothing, it's fine. And then so she finally finds out she's pregnant, and then it's, instead of being like, I'm gonna be a dad, it's like, really? You couldn't have told me this a couple weeks ago? Now I'm alone. Now I have nobody. And so now it's like all right, Ellie, you have to go do all the missions by yourself now. But Dina becomes dead weight, and it becomes, again, it becomes a division in the relationship. But otherwise, yeah, she hangs out in the theater.
Yeah, she's chilling.
Which like everything that you described, Dillon, is so much more interesting. Like, we need that conflict between Ellie and Dina. Like, we need that friction helps to make the story interesting. Otherwise, it really is just like a meandering girls' trip to Seattle. And, like, that's not what we're watching The Last of Us for. And so I wish that there was more of that, like, tension and friction in that relationship. I do appreciate that interaction between Dina and Ellie in this episode. And I think, both actresses did a fantastic job in that and communicating just that tension between them. But, man, I wish that had come earlier in the season. And then for episodes, we're exploring what that is like and seeing them grow more and more distant. Like, there's something interesting there. That conflict is interesting, and I wish we had more of it.
I agree. So I was really caught off guard by their conflict. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy that we're finally getting to, like, our relationship is not all sunshine and rainbows. But it seemed like the driving wedge was this reveal that Joel wasn't as good of a guy as Dina thought he was. But I feel like Dina, for everything she's already been through, for her big hype and talk about how much she loved Joel, wouldn't be as deterred by that, especially when what Joel did was to save the person that she is now dating / planning to raise, like, this kid with. I don't know. Like, am I missing something there? It didn't land for me. I was like, this is what you're mad about?
I had thought that maybe part of the emotion she might have been feeling is that Ellie, like, didn't tell her about it. And that being more, or one of the contributing threads of many, that maybe made her feel that, like, iciness of, like, okay, so you knew this all along. We came all the way here on this grand vengeance plot, but, like, why didn't you tell me any of this back when we were in Jackson? Because now this totally changes everything. And, like, I almost that feeling of, like, I followed you with this whole plot and we did this whole thing together under what I thought was the same circumstances as you, but it seems like there's more information that I didn't get to hear about until now. Like, there's maybe some of that might have also contributed to the feeling, is how I read some of that. Because she's not like pissed or angry. She's kind of like, oh, now you're telling me? Okay.
I think I also read that maybe as that kind of an exploration of the complex morality of The Last of Us. And I know, Dillon, you've talked about this on our previous episodes, but, they go on this journey for revenge, but it almost maybe feels like a righteous mission, like Abby took out Joel seemingly probably to Dina, like, unprovoked. Like, Abby just murdered him in cold blood. And, like, that cannot stand. That is unjust. And so I wonder if, in addition to potentially betrayal and just a dangerous situation, she's going, maybe this actually isn't as righteous a cause as I thought. And maybe there is a little bit of a justification for why Abby did what she did. Coupling that with the fact that she is now very, very injured. She is also very pregnant, and this is a very unsafe place. So I think it might be like a combination of a lot of things that are all kind of hitting her at once, and she realizes, like, oh no, we've made some mistakes along the way, and we need to course correct a little bit here.
Yeah, it ushers in the essence of the conversation that Jesse and Ellie have earlier in the episode, which I thought was so great and so good. And really, I think a thesis of The Last of Us as a show in general so far around, like, how do we define who's in my community that I'm protecting? And how does that contrast, conflict with, bump up against how other people define how they're protecting their communities? And when those things come in tension and conversation with each other, like, the lines get really blurry and everyone's thinking from maybe their lens, but what is my foe is the most beloved person to you, and that's really confusing. And so I thought that scene was so great and really genius, and especially when these two characters that seemingly we would assume have similar, more overlapping communities. It's not even like your foe is my father or your foe is thy father figure. It's actually like we do care about a lot of the same people. Maybe we weigh them differently. For Jesse, he's called to caring for the community of Jackson, and that was his priority, maybe over seeking vengeance for Joel. But for Ellie's like, Joel is my community, and that comes first before everybody else in Jackson. And so I love the way that for so much of the show up until this point, we're seeing your community versus my community be very clear polar opposite sides of the conflict. And in this case, they're actually kind of on the same side, but maybe looking a little bit differently. And the Venn diagram is overlapping less, and that's causing some of their tension and conflict in that conversation. So I loved that reframing. I wish that scene happened a little bit earlier in some way. The whole reveal of Jesse saying, I didn't actually vote. I voted no. I voted against the whole vengeance plot back in, I think, the early episodes of the season. I wish it was a little bit closer because I think it feels like it's drawing back from something that happened so early on in the season. But that framing is so important and significant. I absolutely loved that scene.
I completely agree and wish it would have come sooner. But I'm going to run with what you just said about like calling back to earlier episodes. Now that we have seen the whole season, how do we feel about how much time we spent in Jackson?
That's a good question. I think I feel less strongly about how much time we spend in Jackson. I feel more strongly for how much time we spend with Ellie and Dina just going on an adventure. I feel like there's like at least 2 or 3 episodes in the middle there. Like, I forget which ones, but I think it's maybe like 5 and 6 or 4 and 5 where like really it feels like nothing is significant and happening. We're learning some things about the wolves. We're learning some things about the Seraphites, and the relationship is blossoming. But like those feel like the most inefficient use of time for me for this season. Because I do think a lot of like the Jackson sequences were interesting, especially seeing like communities of people, which I think we don't often see as much in The Last of Us. A lot of like small crews that we're following out in the wild. So I loved some of the dynamics that were showcased in the Jackson scene. So my biggest qualms are with like the middle section where it's just Dina and Ellie, and we're just learning about these really interesting peripheral communities with the Seraphites and the wolves. But we don't get to see them. We just hear about them, and we're palling around with these two gals. I think that's where my biggest qualms are with the use of time. Sarah, what about you?
No, I agree. I think the Jackson bits could be shorter or used differently, but like you, my biggest complaint is just how meandering Seattle has been. And I think that there's a way to make those 2 Jackson-focused episodes really be a strong catalyst for Ellie's journey of revenge and her being on the warpath. I think that 2 episodes could be less, but that can be a good springboard into that. I think my bigger issue is just palling around with no seemingly strong sense of direction or momentum. It's just kind of chilling. And I think that those episodes are by far the weakest, and that's where I would want to change it first. If we can change Jackson, sure, why not? But I think Seattle is the bigger issue with this season.
Yeah, you're right. I did want to complain about Jackson, but then the more y'all talked, I went, you're right. My anger's in the wrong place.
You are welcome to complain about Jackson, though. Like, feel free. You can unburden yourself about Jackson if you would like. Please.
Did we ever get an answer about what was up with the roots growing through the pipes?
No, we never do.
Okay.
Nah, dude. You need to come back and watch season 3 and potentially more seasons.
Listen, Dillon is committed. Sarah, you're the one that's like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, dude.
Dillon, I remember at one point was
done.
like, the bar is down and I'm on this roller coaster till the end.
Here's the
Sarah's
thing.
like mid roller coaster, like, get me out of this car.
Yes. I pulled the emergency chute. Like,
Sure did.
I'm out. I could go without ever watching any more of this show. I will say, if I have to, bow to peer pressure, I will. But I, of my own volition, don't want to watch any more of this show, and I don't trust this show to not do this crap again. So I would like to be done, but, if there's a peer pressure situation, if we're going to do this together, we can have that conversation in 1 to 2 years whenever we get a new season.
Speaking of, I can't remember if it was you, Sarah, or Jen that mentioned it, but talking about spending some time with the Seraphites in the WLF, the big war, theoretically war, big battle scene, looks like WLF is going to like bomb the Seraphites villages and stuff. In the game, that's used as a very useful device to present a challenge to the player, because they now then have to navigate between like all this activity to get to the aquarium that you're trying to get to. And I guess in the show there's like a little bit with like the boats, but I would say that it was actually more of a helpful thing than a hindrance, because they all kind of just like cleared out and left. But I don't know, it felt like we had an opportunity to kind of weave through both of those camps this episode and maybe learn some more about them through that pursuit. And I feel like we just kind of sidestepped it, but there was just like bombs going off in the background. But I don't know, it didn't feel like it was answering or advancing anything for me. So that was a bit of a letdown. Oh, and Ellie getting dragged off on or washed up on the island for the Seraphites to like barely almost kill her, but then also just leave. And I feel like it would have been faster for them to just kill her and then leave rather than just let her down.
Right?
It just, I don't know. It would be curious if either of y'all enjoyed it, but I found myself just going, this could have been so much more, and it just feels thrown in, and now it makes no sense.
Yeah, that is one of the areas of this episode where I was like, I'm more interested in whatever the wolves and the Seraphites have going on than whatever Ellie is doing. Like, I don't care. Give me that world building. Let me know about this cult, because they are fascinating. And then the wolves, they're gearing up for this big whole thing. My guy, Jeffrey Wright, has his whole monologue about like, you're probably going to die. I'm probably going to die, but we need Abby. Like, I am so interested in what the wolves have going on. And that's all that we get is just that conversation. And I'm like, really? Like, those are the groups that I want to know more about. Can we just go watch them waging this war on each other? Because I think that would be more interesting than whatever little side mission we're going on with Ellie. I was so annoyed. I was like, let me see them. Or I love what you said, Dillon, of like, Ellie has to like go through these groups to get to her prize of the aquarium. That would be so thrilling. But instead, I mean, there's a few cool shots with like the wolves loading up their boats, and like all of that is very cool and exciting. But other than that, it was such a letdown, when I think that there are more interesting things that could have been done to further the world building and have a much more exciting action adventure moment. Especially, I think, Dillon, you said this earlier, like, Ellie is a really competent person in this world. And so let's spend a little time seeing her show off her skills rather than, getting drowned in a boat once and then almost hung once. Like, let's show her fighting skills and all of these things that she learned from Joel. That would have been, I think, a more interesting use of our time than her little maritime adventure.
Her maritime adventure. Oh, that's good. She's braving the stormy, choppy seas. I think the show is like unintentionally teasing us so much with that conflict too. There's, after Ellie almost gets hung, you hear the booms in the distance, and then all of the Seraphites run off and are like, it's the wolves, we must go. And all I want to do is run after them with them to go see what's happening there. So I feel like a lot of the middle section of this season, like the 4, 5, 6 of this season, could have been so interesting to see Ellie and Dina continuing to have to figure out how to weasel their way out of being at the wrong place in the wrong time as third-party outsiders stuck in this deadly conflict between these two warring factions. Like, and I think that the vibes are there for that in 4, 5, and 6, but the actual action and the stakes and the drama of that, I think, isn't really teased apart. It's almost like we just are hearing murmurings of these things happening, but we never get to see, we never get to taste and experience all of that drama. We just hear about it constantly from characters, and it's such a tease. I don't think the show's intentionally trying to do that. I think it's like kind of by accident that they're teasing that really well. I would love a whole show just getting to see the Seraphites and the Wolves, the whole history and all of the years of conflict and the new leaders that rise up on both sides. And they seem to have like moles as well that they're sending back and forth into each other's enemy camps. Like, that sounds so exciting. Can we make that a whole show?
Yeah, sign me up for that. Like, let's go. We can have some like spy action adventure type things, like that whole vibe going on between these two groups. Yeah, that I'm here for that show. We can review that show. I don't want to watch season 3 of this show though.
And what would be really interesting, so I'm just going to spin this out a little bit more, about these two factions fighting in the world of The Last of Us is that there's obviously the two human groups of people that are fighting with each other, but then you have the like third dimension and variable of the zombies, and seeing how these two groups figure out survival and adapt to and understand the zombies is actually part of who gets to triumph in the conflict is another interesting dimension too. To like, we've seen obviously a bunch of media constantly about like two warring factions and how they fight each other and the spies and all that kind of stuff. But then you throw in the world of a zombie apocalypse and a zombie like species that is also like adapting and evolving so quickly, and the way that the human groups learn from and understand how to fight against or even utilize some of the forces that be that are beyond human powers. Like, that's kind of interesting too, to throw something that's maybe not fully been seen so prevalently in these kind of like two sides, enemy foes fighting each other. That'd be really fun. Okay. Any other big things we wanted to mention with this season finale before we give out some TVNS awards? I have one final qualm nit. The ending flashback scene with Abby on Seattle Day 1, I think we should just cut that entirely. I think we end with a big dramatic gunshot, let that ring in the air, and then roll the ending credits. I think like Severance season 1 finale, I guess like spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen that finale yet, but I don't have to talk about it too specifically, but they end with something that is as big and dramatic and a big cliffhanger where no questions are answered, but you know that something big has happened. And I just feel like the ending flashback sequence with Abby doesn't give us any new interesting reveals. We don't learn more about who Abby is. We don't learn more about Isaac. We don't even learn that much more about like this community in Seattle. So there's no interesting new insight, but the emotions and the tone of that sequence feel really incongruent and kind of random. I think that ending scene is supposed to tee up that in season 3, we're going to explore a lot more of Abby's story, but it felt like tonally comes at the wrong moment, and we don't get anything like meaty to sink our teeth into as we wait for the next season. So I thought that was kind of a miss, and we could just cut that entirely. Just end on a big, loud gunshot. That's dramatic.
Yeah, I had kind of forgotten about that already. But yeah, you're right. They're teeing up for season 3, but it would have been like it didn't matter. You could just start season 3, episode 1 with Abby waking up and day 1, right? That would be fine. Yeah, that was a miss. Good call.
And I think what made that little ending flashback scene all the more frustrating for me is that final scene, that final confrontation between Abby and Ellie is so good. You know, that whole scene starting with Jesse's death, which is so abrupt and tragic. All that whole piece is so solid. Like, that is what we have been wanting from The Last of Us this entire season, and we finally get it. And it's like, oh my gosh, that was so good. Like, way to end the episode on a high / aka very, very scared, tense cliffhanger. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, we're doing this other thing instead. And I was like, well, that's pretty indicative of this season. So it was just so frustrating.
All right, let's give out some TVNS awards, shall we? The first category is for Scrappiest Survivor. What are your choices for this award?
Shout out to my boy Jesse for giving us some closure. My Scrappiest Survivor award goes to Shimmer. Hanging out in that music store, eating guitars. I don't know what else Shimmer's eating in there, but Shimmer's apparently doing great.
Great choice. I love it. Sarah, what's your choice?
Okay, I want to give it to Tommy for using his magical powers to make out of whatever situation he found himself in.
That's so funny. I gave it to Tommy, too.
Yes.
Because all you hear is big booms in the distance, and Jesse's like, Tommy's over there. And then Ellie's like, well, if they send more people, too bad. Tommy can figure it out. So I'm like, Tommy is the scrappiest survivor of all time. All right, the next category is for grittiest moment. What are your choices for this one?
I've got to go with Mel's death scene. It was just haunting, the, discussions about like trying to save the baby. Oof.
Yeah. That's a great choice. That was big. That was a big moment. Sarah, what is your choice for grittiest moment?
Yeah, I want to give this to the moment when Jesse tells Ellie that he didn't vote for her.
Ooh, nice. Nice. Bella Ramsey does a great job, with a little bit of a delayed reaction as it's settling in, because the shock of no way. No way. You didn't? You told me? Oh, the betrayal is so good. You see it settle in on her face. I'm going to give this award to the child Sarah fight that makes the slashing motion as instruction to the community to take Ellie out. Oh, that was so dramatic. This tiny child.
Oh, it was so good. And I think that scene especially helps reinforce that focus of The Last of Us on morality and the way that, the apocalypse really messes with you, including little kids. So that's really depressing and very gritty. So good choice.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, straight shooter award. What are your choices for this one?
Similar to Jesse's reveal of voting no, moments after that, Jesse saying, because everything you do for you.
Oh, it's such a gut punch. Oh, man. That's a great choice. And you see Ellie lose her mind after that, too.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
I think that's followed up by the screw the community comments. Yeah.
Sarah, what's your choice for straight shooter?
Yeah, I want to give it to our girl Elise for when she says to Isaac, are you in love with her or something? You wouldn't be the first old man to. And then he cuts her off. It's so good.
Nice. I'm going to give the straight shooter award to Isaac, who says to Elise, so what happens to that entire freaking army out there who, despite their very badass name, are very much sheep?
Oh, it's so good. Yep. That whole scene is fire. My guy Jeffrey Wright brings it.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved that scene. It was there was so much good dialogue in that moment.
So good. So good. Okay. How do we want to think about looking ahead? Dillon, I know you're going to watch season 3. What are you hopeful for? What do you want them to not do in season 3 that they did in season 2? Or what are you excited to see how they handle with the comparisons or the inspiration from the game as well? I know it's probably hard to talk about it a little bit because some of the ingredients that the show writers might have to work with from the storyline. But yeah, any thoughts on looking ahead?
I do have thoughts. Let me say, if I haven't said it before, there's about 2 years before season 3 is supposed to come out. In that time, I highly recommend everybody go play the actual game. Just do it. You can play on easy mode. It'll be great. You'll get so much out of the story. You'll have a phenomenal time. But in looking ahead, I want them to try and fix the tonal shifts that they've made in characters, but they can't do it immediately, right? I mean, they're going to have to nudge back into it, but I really want to see them try to commit to, you can't copy paste and have the exact same major story moments while also fundamentally changing the behavior of the core characters. So they've either got to go a bit more rogue and go off script of what the game did, which is fine. Season 1 did that, and Season 1 was phenomenal. But they need to start making some of those shifts. The other thing I will say is, and I don't think I'm ruining anything with this, because we end this season with Abby at Seattle Day 1. This implies that there is a story to tell about what happens to Abby days 1 through 3 until we get back to that moment. If we take like half of next season to get through Abby's days, the same way we did with Ellie, like, I'm going to be pissed because there's so much more story to tell. And I'm starting to understand why, in an interview, I think it was Druckmann, said that they would really need 4 seasons to do this properly. And I'm worried that that's because they've already started thinking about season 3. And I'm worried half of it's going to go to Abby before we even get back to our cliffhanger. So I hope they don't do that. I hope they learn.
Wow. So 2 whole more seasons worth of story arcs that they're going to need to fill and drag out some things or make up some things. Honestly, maybe that's better for them at this point, because they maybe that tension of having to like try and stick to somewhat of a story, but then having the freedom. Maybe they just need to do what they did with season 1 and just write your story inspired by the video game. Sarah, what are you hoping to see? Hoping that season 3 will do that you may not see because you won't watch?
Here's the thing. I want to see my guy Jeffrey Wright. I want more about the wolves and the Seraphites. They're so interesting to me. So let's capitalize on these 2 really fascinating groups of people and how they are navigating this apocalyptic world. Like, that is fascinating to me. And then the other thing that this season started to tee up is the way that the zombies are evolving. You know, I think that that's really fascinating too, because just when you think you have it, you know what you're doing when you encounter these fungus zombies, but now they've changed and you have to learn and adapt. And I think that that is also fascinating for our characters. And I think that there was a lot of room in this season for more of that to happen and exploring these ways that the fungus is mutating. And the show just didn't capitalize on that. So I think that would be a really cool thing in season 3 to explore, you know, these new threats that our heroes are encountering that are going to force them to have to adapt and grow and change themselves. Otherwise, they're not going to make it. So I think those things could make for a more interesting like world that these characters are then trying to navigate their way through.
Yeah, I kept waiting for the insight about the cordyceps being airborne to somehow intersect with this finale, but I think by the time we were like 30 minutes, 40 minutes in, I was like, I don't know if there's enough like room for having to deal with all of that and also tie up a lot of these loose threads. I'm really intrigued to see more about Seattle. I think the most interesting parts of the show are seeing and understanding the way that like different societies or communities of people try and build to a society and how they innovate. Maybe that's also why I like a lot of the Jackson sequences. I would like to see more zombie attacks. I would like to see more zombie fights. I feel like we got a little bit less of them overall in the second season. I feel like I can count on one hand, maybe two, like the big sequences that we get where we're fighting some zombies. And for the most part, I feel like this leads a little bit more into the relational dynamics and the melodrama of the relationships that are unfolding between the characters, and having the zombies come in and maybe complicate or push characters to bond with each other or to betray each other, I think would be more interesting. There's a lot more of that, I feel like, in season 1, where we saw characters really have to trust each other and take the leaps of faith. Henry and Sam's sequence, that's a great example of it. And I feel like we get a little bit less of that. The zombies feel kind of like tangential. They're kind of like there for the vibes, there for the atmosphere, versus really affecting the character dynamics and the relationships. And I would like to see a little bit more integration there. I think that's like where the show becomes really interesting and really strong, and also gives us the entertainment factor of it all. So more zombie attacks with more character moments that are meaningfully tied to those things is what I would like to see next. All right. Well, well, I guess we'll see 2 years later how we're all feeling and if we're going to talk about the show again, as it sounds like they're cooking up not one, but sounds like maybe even 2 more seasons of this world. In the meantime, though, this was our review of the season finale of The Last of Us Season 2. You can find it available on Max. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of TV and Us. A big thank you to you, Dillon, for joining us for this whole journey. 7 whole episodes of getting to talk about The Last of Us Season 2. It was so fun.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
So fun. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us as we wrapped up our journey through The Last of Us Season 2. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about the season finale and some of the big moments that happened in this episode. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at tvnspod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmedia.co, for the latest on TV and Us and our other podcast, Movies and Us. We'll be back soon with some other episode formats that you'll see on the feed here soon. And then we've got a whole nother season of new television that's coming right around the corner for the summer that we're excited to dive into very soon. And this is one that the world of this show may be familiar to y'all. We've covered it on the show in the past. So we're super excited to be back with our friends in that show. All right. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.